Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I didn't hear the first news report so much as feel it. A vibration of worry running through the terminal at Logan. I had just cleared security at Terminal B with a carry-on full of camera gear, 3 lenses, extra batteries, and a notebook fat with bus tickets and press credentials, when the public address system thunked and went quiet. Everyone looked up at once, because we all know that feeling. Something official. Something bigger than the usual gate change or weather delay. The monitor above me still cycled through on-time flights, while a view of the tarmac glowed behind the glass, pinwheels of blue taxiway lights dotting the dusk. Then the screen at the bar switched from sports to a local feed, a crawler flashing, public health advisory. The announcer's voice was calm, trained, the cadence of someone who believes that if they don't panic, maybe you won't either. The Department of Public Health is asking residents to shelter in place as first responders address a series of medical incidents at Boston medical facilities and Logan International Airport. If you are at Logan, remain where you are and await instructions. The bartender found the remote, turned the volume up, looked at us and said, "Probably nothing," in a way that told me he didn't believe it. Something else came first. The sirens. Logan has its own rhythm. Ground crews in reflective vests, the squat fire engines that sit along the runways, the clatter of rolling suitcases, and the sirens cut across all of it with a red urgency that made me think of the way lightning flattens a landscape. Airline staff started talking quietly with Massport officers near the gate doors. A plane from Europe had landed, and the jet bridge had gone up, and then there'd been a pause, and then more sirens. No one called it an outbreak, not then. Words like that come later, when there's time to decide what language fits the shape of the day. What we had were directions on the overheads, a second news flash, and the small disquiet that grows when the rules of the place, lines, seating zones, the dance of boarding, no longer line up with what people are feeling. The first scream from another concourse didn't sound like fear so much as something torn open. People turned as one body, like birds wheeling. I didn't wait for instructions. I pulled my bag on, ducked past a family hugging each other too tightly, and followed the sense every Bostonian understands. When something bad is rolling in, you move. I cut down the stairs to the arrivals level, slipped through a side door marked for employees only. The badge reader had been taped open, and found myself in a corridor that smelled like coffee and new carpet. A Massport worker hurried the other way with a box of radios. He saw my press badge and said, "If you can get out," and didn't slow down. Outside, the night had gone windy, that harbour wind that knifes across your cheeks and makes paper rattle. Police cruisers were parked at bad angles under the elevated roadway, lights painting everything red and blue. Over the water, a plane held in a pattern, a silver dot sliding across the dark. I crossed to the Silver Line platform, figuring a bus to South Station and then the Red Line home. The platform was packed, people shifting from one foot to the other, checking phones. A woman with a stroller asked if I knew what was happening. I told her the truth. No. We stood there and listened to sirens. The emergency alert system interrupted everyone's phones at once, that bone-deep tone filling the air. The message was simple: shelter in place, avoid travel, avoid the MBTA if possible, wait for further notice. A few people obeyed right away and stepped away from the platform edge. More did not. When the SL1 bus finally arrived, it was already full. It still opened its doors to a crush that made me step back. I watched it pull away and made a decision that, in retrospect, saved me. I would not ride underground. I left the platform, crossed the sky bridge back toward the central parking garage, and followed the signs to the pedestrian route for the harbour walk. Outside, the wind tasted like salt and jet fuel. Sirens echoed into the steel. The city, across the channel, was a constellation of normal. The only break in the pattern was the hospital area, a cluster of bright, urgent strobes near Massachusetts General Hospital, like a storm caught in glass. I started walking. By the time I reached the MBTA Blue Line Airport station, its glass shell humming beneath the tracks, another alert chirped through the phones. The MBTA would continue limited service for evacuation, crowding likely. The crowd here had already made up its mind. People were pressing into the station, voices tight, siblings clasping hands, a businessman trying to calm an elderly man who kept asking which train went to Revere. I kept moving west along the pedestrian path toward the Sumner Tunnel entrance and the airport rotary, then cut inland. I caught a ride near the rental car center with a pair of restaurant workers from East Boston who were driving toward Charlestown to check on family. The driver, a woman with steady hands, said, "Stay off the tunnels, if something happens in there," and the rest of the sentence made itself. We took the long way, the Tobin Bridge. From its spine, we saw the city proper, the back of the Zuckin Bridge like a harp, the State House dome a quiet gold hill, Beacon Hill's brick fading into night. I got out at City Square in Charlestown as they turned toward Bunker Hill. By then the radio was talking in a new vocabulary. Containment areas, temporary closures, triage points. A broadcaster said the words unusual aggression. He said do not approach anyone exhibiting uncontrolled behavior. He said to avoid downtown. Beacon Hill is downtown's neighbor, and it never looked so uphill as it did that night. I skirted the Charles River on foot, keeping the black gleam of it to my left. At the base of the Longfellow Bridge, a state police cruiser blocked traffic headed into Cambridge. The trooper, a woman with a smooth, locked expression, stood with a bullhorn and told pedestrians to go back. Behind her, the Red Line stood motionless on the bridge, its cars like a centipede frozen mid-crawl. A few dozen people gathered in confusion. We heard, carried on the wind from the Boston Common direction, a sound that was not quite a roar, not quite a crowd, but something like both. Fear has a rhythm. This was faster. I turned up Cambridge Street toward MGH. Outside the main entrance, hospital security maintained a taped walkway from the door to ambulances idling with back doors open. Staff moved like practiced dancers. Triage tags, quick checks, transfers. It would have been a thing of admiration if not for what came through the doors. I won't describe it beyond this. Some people moved with a speed and intention that didn't fit the situation, as if they were pulled down a track by a magnet. There were shouts to restrain, then shouts to retreat. In a window above us, someone slammed a blind down. Across the way, at a bus stop, a man stood on a bench and yelled, "Run downtown is bad," over and over until his voice gave out. That's when I found my group, though found is not the right word. We collided. A firefighter in a black jacket with yellow reflective bars, Boston Fire Department, came out of the hospital with a woman in scrubs and a young guy in a puffy jacket. The firefighter was glass-eyed with the look of someone who hasn't had the luxury of fear yet because he's still working. He had a Halligan bar hooked through his belt and a radio clipped to his collar, and he said to me, not kindly, "You got family around here?" "No," I said. "I live on Joy Street." That was true, a small apartment halfway up Beacon Hill. "Press," I added, as if that meant anything now. "Then you're coming with us," he said, like a foreman assigning a task he didn't want to reopen for debate. "We're not staying out here while the tide's rising." The woman in scrubs met my eyes and said, "I'm Maya, MGH Internal Medicine. This is Liam." The younger guy raised a hand, shy even now. "Mechanical engineering at BC. The name's Liam Park." His breath steamed. The firefighter was Sean. South Boston by accent, ladder company by the patch on his sleeve. We took Cambridge Street together, working west. Above us, the top levels of the parking garage were lit bright as a stage, and silhouettes moved along the edge, curious or guarding, or both. We didn't linger. Past the garden, we turned onto Stanford, then snagged right and up through Bullfinch Triangle, weaving until the hill started. Beacon Hill is a labyrinth of one-way lanes, federal-era brick, and cobblestone that makes ankles complain. Its density, so romantic on a weekend, now felt like a tactical reality. Narrow lanes, sightlines, choke points. Sean muttered the word defensible under his breath like a prayer. At the bottom of Joy Street, we heard the first true swell from the common. It echoed in the cut between buildings, the old timbers shrugging it down to us. A wave of people came around the corner at Park Street and poured toward Beacon Street. Not a crowd, not anymore. Something else. We pressed against a railing to let a family sprint by. Grandmother, father, little girl holding a stuffed animal by one ear. Liam whispered, "This street's a funnel." "Exactly," Sean said, "which is why we don't stand in the wide part. We go up, and then we cork it." I had keys to my building, but we didn't go there. Sean's eyes had moved across Beacon Hill's grid with the instinct of someone who has memorized hydrant caps and stair widths and exterior standpipes. He pointed toward a side lane. Cedar. It was narrow, with only a few parked cars and a run of brick that formed a clean wall. "Dead end," I said. "Exactly," he said again. "You don't want through traffic right now." We approached a brownstone with a stoop high enough to command the street. A wrought iron fence still holding last winter's dry ivy. The front door had a keypad. Sean said, "Sometimes people hide keys under the lip of the top stair." He didn't smile, but somehow I knew he would in another life. We didn't find a key. We found a broken basement window on the garden level 3 doors down and made a decision that all of us, in our own ways, would wrestle with later. We climbed in because outside, the noise at the bottom of the hill thickened. The air inside smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet. We called into the apartment first, loudly, and waited, and called again. No answer. "We'll leave a note," Maya said, which we did, written on a piece of my notebook paper and taped to the inside door with painter's tape from a drawer. "Emergency refuge. We will secure the building. If you return, call out before entering." It wasn't elegant. It was our best. We did the things you do when you commit to a place. Sean pulled shades, turned off lights that faced the street, and opened interior doors to map the apartment's flow. Maya found a flashlight and a first aid kit under the sink and laid them out on the kitchen counter like a small altar. Liam went for tools, because every apartment has a drawer of them. Screwdrivers, a tiny level, the sort of utility knife that makes you respect your fingers. I dug the dry goods from the pantry and checked labels with Maya's help. 2 cans of soup, a bag of rice, a trio of protein bars, instant coffee. "It's a start," she said. We moved upstairs carefully, calling out before each doorway until we had checked the 4 floors up to the roof access hatch. No one. On the roof, the city lay in a ring. Back toward downtown, the glow had gone strange, a few moving clusters of light in places that did not usually move. If we were going to stay, we would need more than pantry food. We would need water, information, a plan that didn't involve hoping. "Beacon Hill is older than the grid," Liam said as we looked down into the close-run streets. "The streets twist. That's good for us, but we'll get pinned if we can't see them coming." "Rooftop to rooftop," Sean said, squinting at the neighbouring buildings. Many had short gaps between them, the sort of alley jump that isn't heroic in daylight and impossible at night. "We can make paths and choke the streets," I said. "Abandoned cars as blockades, trash bins, furniture." "Barricades," Sean said, stowing his radio under his coat so its light would not show. "And watching posts. We'll need a rhythm. 2 up, 2 down, trade off." He looked at me. "You shoot, right? Cameras. You have eyes. Use them." "I can also carry," I said, "and I have a decent arm." It sounded thin, bragging about an arm while the world changed its rules. But he nodded anyway. Maya's phone cracked out a hospital group text. A message coming through delayed. "ER diverting. Contain if possible. Use masks and eye protection. Avoid bites." We stood in a small silence after that. She tucked the phone away. "We need medical supplies," she said softly. We all looked toward Charles Street, where the small pharmacies and corner markets had their racks of antiseptics and bandages and over-the-counter basics. Between us and Charles Street lay a tangle of lanes, and beyond, the growing sound from the common. We moved fast because fast is safer when it's measured. First, we made home base. We wedged furniture behind the front and garden doors. A heavy console table, a bookcase whose books went into a neat stack for later. We found a set of spare keys on a hook labeled painter and used them to access the roof again without needing to unbolt. We rigged a rope from a coil of laundry line we found in a closet, fixating it through a vent and testing it with our weight. Liam, voice tight with adrenaline, suggested we mark a small chalk arrow near the roof hatch to guide us in the dark. He drew it himself, then stared at it like it might be a compass. Then we went for supplies. We moved as a unit, down Cedar to the wider Pinckney Street, then down toward Charles. The street lamps threw soft cones like theatre lights. You could pass between them and feel unseen. At the end of Pinckney, we paused in the lee of a stoop and looked west. Charles Street is a spine. Cafes, boutiques, a handful of pharmacies, a small grocery. Even now, with many gates already down, a few lights glowed behind papered windows. People hurried with bags. A man shouted something about a boat, and others shouldered past. Sean led us into the first pharmacy. The alarm chirped when he pried the latch with his Halligan. "We're not looting," he said, breath low. "We're requisitioning. We leave a note. We leave cash if we have it. We take what keeps people alive." It sounded like something his department chief had told him sometime in a different emergency. Maya went for gloves first, then masks, then saline, alcohol, disinfectant wipes, gauze, tape, a blood pressure cuff, a thermometer, pain relievers. Antibiotics were behind the counter, and we didn't touch them because she shook her head, and we listened. "We don't know allergies," she said. "We don't know interactions. The basics will carry us." I grabbed a pair of small two-way radios in blister packs near the registers, because sometimes the universe hides kindness in the bargain aisle. Liam found a flashlight that didn't feel like a toy and took the batteries too. At the register, Sean left the note, neatly written in black marker. "Emergency supplies taken during city emergency. We will return or compensate when able." He slid the contents of his wallet, cash $34, under the marker. "It's symbolic," he said, and we understood the ritual. We needed to be more than the night. We were 2 blocks back toward the hill when the first of them reached the corner. There were 3, which I offer as reassurance. Sometimes crises come in manageable numbers first, the universe giving you a small test before the real one. They moved with a wrongness that had nothing to do with limping or injury. It was as if the space between them and us didn't have air in it. They didn't see us at once. Their heads swept, and then one fixed, and the other 2 pivoted as if someone would tug the string. "Back," Sean said, not loud, and our feet obeyed. We didn't run. We slid back into shadow, cutting a diagonal toward a narrow alley that ducked between brick. We went up it sideways, our shoulders brushing mortar, and emerged into a back courtyard that smelled like wet earth and boxwood. A black iron gate faced us, locked. Liam looked at the hinges like he could reason with them. Sean didn't. He wedged the Halligan's fork and levered once. The bolt snapped and we went through, then pushed the gate back until it almost latched, as if we were the kind of people who closed things behind us, which we were. We heard the trio at the mouth of the alley, feet scuffing stone in an arrhythmic beat. They pressed against the shadows, and for a second, one face appeared in a sliver of light. The skin around the eyes was too tight. The eyes themselves were too intent, like a cat about to spring. I could say more, but we agreed later not to say more when we didn't have to. The gate held. They tested it, then recoiled, when a motion light popped on above the door behind them. The shock of illumination confused them for a precious few seconds, and we used those seconds to climb over a small retaining wall, cut into another alley, and then up Joy Street in a crouch that was almost a prayer. We made it back. We learned the rule. You move when the moment is yours, and you don't gift it to them. That first night we took shifts, 2 on the roof, 2 inside by the front door where we could hear the street without being seen through the glass. We drank water at measured intervals because planning is a way to remind yourself you have a future. We spoke in low voices because it made space feel safer. We tried the radios and found a channel where a state voice read closures and updates in a measured tempo, then paused, then repeated. The cadence became a lullaby. Maya slept first, sitting in a chair with her chin tucked and her fingers still holding the strap of her bag. Liam sat on the roof with me, eyes shining and wide. "I keep thinking about the bridges," he said. "If they close them, Cambridge goes away. So does Charlestown. So does everything north." "They won't blow the bridges," I said, and immediately knew I had overpromised. "Not all of them." "They'll do what they have to," he said. He said it like a line from a class, the way engineers talk about load limits and safety margins. "I want to go to the common," he added, then raised a hand as if warding off my argument. "Not now, eventually. If families are trapped near the hill and we have a way to pull them up and through, we make a path," I finished. It wasn't a promise so much as an acceptance that if we could, we would. Near midnight, Sean joined us. "Checkpoint on the Longfellow's going to fail," he said, eyes on the pulsing lights across the river. "They can't hold that much foot movement if people keep pressing. If they decide to cut it, they'll do it fast." He rubbed his thumb along the Halligan's shaft like a habit. "We'll need to decide before dawn. Dig in or break out. I'm not making the call alone." "We fortify," Maya said from the doorway behind us. She hadn't been sleeping. "The hospital's a draw, the common's a draw, but these streets are narrow. If we plan the choke points, we can make a neighborhood out of it. And people will come. If we show we're a place to come to, not just a rock in a stream, we make our odds better." "We don't have enough for more mouths," Liam said gently. "We will," she said, and because she said it like a doctor who's seen ugly days become ordinary ones, we felt it could be true. So in the morning, the sky the soft grey of old maps, we became a unit with roles. Sean showed us how to build barricades that looked like trash but acted like walls. We didn't create elaborate constructions. We dragged a small pickup sideways at the pinch point of cedar, its front wheels kissing the curb so tightly it would have taken a toe to shift it. We tipped two of the big rolling trash carts onto their sides to make a wedge. We pulled a planter, a concrete circle with a dead sapling, into the space between. We left gaps a person could thread but not at speed. We placed a mirror from a broken dresser at an angle so you could see down the block without showing yourself. It felt like a trick you'd learned from an older sibling. We met our neighbours when we slammed the planter into place and a window above us flew open. "What are you doing to my garden?" a woman demanded. She was 60 if she was a day, cheeks pink with indignation. Behind her, a cat with the disposition of a senator watched us. "Ma'am," Sean said in a voice that could talk nonsense out of a smoke-filled room, "we're putting your garden to work for the neighbourhood. We'll put it back when this is over." "When what is over?" she asked, and then let us inside for tea, because some Boston habits run deeper than fear. Her name was Eleanor. She had lived on the hill since long before the internet had opinions about it. Within 10 minutes, we had her on our side, and within 15, she had produced a roll of duct tape, a real toolbox, and a small battery radio that caught the one frequency that mattered. Through the morning and into afternoon, we made a perimeter around a square of the hill. Cedar, Cedar Lane Way, West Cedar, Pinckney. We didn't close it. Others lived here, and we weren't the sheriff of anything, but we suggested. We placed movable barricades and attached notes that explained how and why. Temporary barrier for safety. Move only in daylight, return to position, call out before pushing through. We met people. A graduate student who'd been alone too long and nearly cried when we asked his name. A retired MBTA conductor who knew schedule logic and thus understood the rhythm of crowds in his bones. A couple who owned a tiny cafe near Charles, who brought us coffee that made us forget we had slept in our shoes. People want to organise. They want to feel the edges of their world. Our job became giving them edges. We set up lookouts on the roofs. The first time I hopped the small gap between our brownstone and the one next door, My stomach dropped to my shoes, but my feet were true. Liam became our bridge maker, setting 2x8s across short gaps, testing with his weight, then adding a second board so no one would have to face the void alone. We drew a chalk map on the roof near the hatch, our lane, neighbouring roofs, the vantage points marked with X's. We set a schedule on a scrap of cardboard. Everyone signed up for watches, because signing your name makes a thing real. Maya took the front hallway of our building and turned a half landing into a triage corner. She set a sheet on a small table, laid out gloves, masks, and the supplies we had gathered, and in the afternoon, she changed a dressing for a man who had fallen on stone stairs and split his scalp in a way that looked worse than it was. She cleaned, pressed, taped, spoke softly, and made him laugh once, and you could feel the hall breathe out when he walked back upstairs steady on his feet. "No hero moves," she told him. "Conserve your energy, hydrate, come back tomorrow morning so I can check it." He nodded like he'd been given a schedule by an anchor woman. People need routines. In the late afternoon, news from the river. A rumour swelled through the roof watch that the Longfellow Bridge checkpoint was closing. We eyed the rail cars stranded on the bridge and the small figures of people walking along the ties. You want to believe that if you're on a bridge, you've chosen a path and you'll get to the other side. The river doesn't care about your metaphors. We saw the barricades at the Boston end change shape. The line of National Guard vehicles, a modest convoy that had looked resolute a few hours earlier, now looked hurried. Through binoculars borrowed from Eleanor, of course she had binoculars, we saw soldiers waving people back, saw the gestures change from calm to emphatic. The flow of walkers slowed, stopped, then funneled back toward Cambridge. A helicopter stirred the air above MGH like an insect, then moved upriver. The wide space of water between the bridge's arches looked larger than before. "Decision point," Sean said on the roof, as if he were calling an audible in a game. "We stay fortified, and we expect pressures from the common tonight. Or we use daylight, get a small group across to Cambridge, or further, and hope the bridges don't go next." "Cambridge is no safer," Maya said. "Same density, same crowd draw, but it does have labs with equipment we could use, and food stores in Harvard Square and Inman. The question is, what do we owe the people who are finding us here? We started something. We have to see it through." "I'll go if we go," Liam said, staring at the bridge with a thoughtful anger, as if it had betrayed him. "But if we stay, I want to build something better than barricades, a signal, a way to talk across rooftops without shouting." "Flags," I said, and they both looked at me with surprise, like I had recommended semaphore. But in fact, that was exactly what I meant. Coloured cloth at agreed positions, one for all clear, one for movement south, one for movement west, one for help. "Simple," Maya said, nodding. "No batteries, no static." We found sheets in the building's laundry room. We cut them into panels with kitchen scissors and coloured them with markers and paint from a hobby box we found under a bed. Thank you to some unknown tenant's art project. By dusk, 5 rooftops on our square had the same 4 signals stacked on a brick by their hatch. We talked it through with the neighbours who had become fellow crew. Blue for clear, red for heavy movement, yellow for caution, white for help. We tested it, raising red and watching the ripple of red around us. It felt like a small city becoming itself in a new way. Then the sun slid and the shadows pulled, and with them came the sound from the common. It started ragged, like trash blown against a fence, and grew into something organised by numbers alone, not drums, not chanting. The sound of feet when feet stopped being individuals. We saw the ripple first on the south edge of the hill, down toward West Street. People we did not know in numbers we had not yet seen moved onto Beacon and across Charles toward the river, like a field of grain deciding to lean one way. Behind them, a smaller fringe at first, then many, the ones drawn by motion. They followed the movement the way iron filings find a magnet. They pressed against any obstacle with that intent wrongness we had learned to recognize. They flowed where the space invited them and pressed where it didn't. The edges tried not to be edges anymore. We were on the roof, when the first group of neighbours arrived at our front door with eyes too big. A father carried a small boy asleep in his arms. Blessedly asleep, I should say, because the boy's breathing calmed everyone around him. A woman with a service dog asked where to sit and immediately found 3 tasks to do without anyone telling her. Water, blankets, watch the stairs. A graduate student, another, asked if we had books and then was embarrassed by the question. We did. We had the books we had pulled from the barricade bookcase and we handed them around like talismans. People read with the concentration of prayer, and every so often you'd catch a line of poetry spoken aloud under a breath. Around 9, a call from the roof. Pinckney. We slid out with our gear. Gear in our case was simple. We had nothing fancy, nothing we would later be ashamed to have used. Sean had his Halligan and a length of rope. Liam had a solid flashlight and a crowbar. Maya had the medical bag and, because she'd taken every safety class the hospital had offered, eye protection and gloves. I had a camera I'd taped over so its light wouldn't betray us, and a heavy flashlight that doubled as a club if it had to, and I prayed it wouldn't. We were not a combat team, and we would never be. We were a housekeeping crew for a neighbourhood caught in a hard storm. At Pinckney, we saw the barricade doing its job and not doing enough. A group of 5 people we didn't know had tried to push through in a rush and had jammed the trash carts at a bad angle that made the gap too small for their own bodies. They panicked, then made noise, then drew attention from further down where the street widened. We needed to fix it in the time it takes to inhale. Quiet hands, Sean said, a mantra he repeated when moving something heavy with the department. We put hands on the cart, lifted together, slid it 2 inches, 3. We used the planter's mass as a hinge. The gap reopened to a body width. The 5 people, 2 men, a woman, a teenager, a person whose gender I couldn't guess in the low light, squeezed through, faces flat with fear. One tripped, I caught him by the belt and hauled him up, and we didn't exchange names because names were for later. They ran for the lit window 3 doors up, where someone waved. We returned the carts to their angle, re-wedged the pickup's wheel against the curb, and retreated into shadow as the movement from below oozed up the slope like syrup. From then until midnight, the hill became a breathing thing. Pressure from the south, release from the west. We raised red flags at intervals, watched them ripple across rooftops, and lowered them when the movement thinned. We rotated watch, passed water, checked on the boy asleep on his father's shoulder and the woman with the service dog, who had become a chief of small logistics. Who had a blanket? Who needed quiet? Who needed to talk to stop shaking? Maya moved from person to person invisibly. A pressed hand here, a check of temperature there. She took a splinter from an old man's palm with tweezers, and the gratitude in his eyes was bigger than the task. Around 1, a dull flash by the river, not the fireworks kind, controlled, contained, the kind you see when something heavy meets water. We looked at each other and knew, without knowing, that the Longfellow was no longer what it had been at sunset. A voice on the radio confirmed it 20 minutes later with careful words. The westbound pedestrian route is closed. All movement into Boston from Cambridge is suspended. Across the water, the river took on the businesslike look of a night shift. Small boats, bright decks, moving with purpose. We weren't going to Cambridge. Cambridge had effectively been pushed further away. The map of the city had changed, and with it, our thinking. Morning came, like it always does. Grey, then lighter. People in our makeshift common room looked at each other with the shy surprise of those who have shared a sleepover without plan and woken up not dead. That is not a dramatic way to put it. The first victory of any day in a disaster is the fact that there is a day. We kept the rhythm. Watch, water, small chores, breakfast that tasted better than it deserved because someone had found peanut butter and someone else had coffee, and we had made something like toast with a pan and patience. We sent small pairs, always pairs, out in daylight to collect what the immediate houses could contribute with permission. Batteries, candles, a can opener, a tarp, a coil of rope. We set up a rain collector on the roof with the tarp and a clean bin. Because the sky was heavy, and because water is the lesson any city learns early in any emergency. We made a charging station near Eleanor's radio, an octopus of cords when power winked back on in our block for an hour. We did not ask why that hour came to us. We used it, then said thank you to no one in particular. That afternoon, we made a decision that changed the size of our world. At the north edge of the common, near the corner of Beacon and Park, a townhouse had been smoking all night. Not flaming, smoking, the slow, angry exhalation of a building that has been hurt and will not let you ignore it. The smoke had thickened in the morning air. We could not let it cook all day. The draw would be too strong, the sightline too obvious, and somewhere inside, two yet-to-be-seen outcomes balanced on a beam. Either there were people, or there weren't. We made a plan to find out. You don't go towards smoke, Eleanor said, which was the distilled wisdom of 60 winters of headlines. I know, Sean said softly, and his voice carried enough of his life's nights to convince her. But sometimes you go, because if you don't, the smoke picks its own time to become flame. We turned the plan over like a stone until each side made sense. Two would go, Sean and me, because of the tools we had and the way we moved together. Maya would stage at the midpoint with a kit, as close as safety allowed. Liam would run the rooftop line, eyes on us, signals ready. Two reds raised together would mean we needed tourists to get off their roof and stay off the street. Two whites would mean help. Blue was the wish, all clear. We told everyone where we'd be. We said when we would be back. Accountability is love when love looks like logistics. We didn't carry anything we didn't want to lose. No sentimental bits, no artifacts, just the basics: gloves, eye protection, makeshift masks, a small pry bar, Sean's Halligan, a modest fire extinguisher we'd found under a neighbour's sink, and a coil of rope across my chest like a bandolier. We moved through side streets we had made our own by memorising their quirks: the broken cobble near the lamppost, the shallow step by the iron fence. The further south we went, the more the world changed back into the one we had left last night. Paper knocked down by wind, a bike lying on its side near the curb, a storefront whose sign creaked more loudly than it should. At the corner of Beacon and Park we saw it, smoke the colour of dirt, lifting from the cracks around a townhouse's second-floor balcony. A small flame spat once at the edge of a broken shutter, then thought better of it. The front door was closed, the brass polished by a lifetime of someone who cared. We didn't knock. We called out through the door and waited. We called again. Then Sean wedged the Halligan's adze into the gap and leaned. Old wood resists with affection. It wants to stay what it was. We apologised to it, then opened it, because doing nothing would have been worse. The hallway inside was clear, lined with framed photographs of children in snow, a wedding, a dog with a sock in its mouth. We called out again, announced ourselves and listened. Houses speak. This one spoke of the small creaks that mean heat in the walls. We went to the stairs and up one flight and paused. Sean went first past the riser where the smoke thickened. I stayed at his shoulder, a hand on the rope clipped to his belt, because teams are built on stupid simple things like that. In the front bedroom, a window had broken out, and the wind off the common pushed the curtain like a throat. Papers blew against the bed. On the nightstand, a phone still buzzed with missed calls. I saw the name Mum and had to look away because the limit of what we could do had a sharp edge. Smoke worried at the door to the back hallway. We checked the closet quickly. Empty. Then room by room, we moved to the back. Kitchen, pantry, a small office. In the office, a man. He lay on the floor in the position of someone who had sat at his desk until sitting had become not sitting. He was pale and still breathing. Across one cheek, a mark the colour of wine bloomed like a map. We did not need the details of how or why. We needed to get him out without drawing the attention of the street and without inviting the house to finish its sulk with a flame. On three, Sean said, and we rolled him onto a rug that looked sturdy. He was taller than both of us, and the kind of man whose life had not involved being carried. We pulled, careful to keep his head off the floor by cushioning it with the edge of the rug. Down the hallway we went, the smoke testing our eyes, the boards whispering, down the stairs where we paused and listened and heard nothing but the house and our hearts. Out the front door to the stoop, where Maya waited 2 houses away, tucked behind a garden wall. She saw us, saw the man, and moved like a lion snapping taut. We brought him to the garden wall, where she checked breathing, pulse, pupils, the steps of an exam that makes sense even when the building across the street chooses that moment to cough flame up through its own throat. From the back of the townhouse, a window hiccuped glass, and the smoke changed from dirt brown to the tan of something finding more fuel than it wants. The street, which had been active but not yet drawn, finally noticed. Figures moved toward the motion, the wrong motion. Sean swore once, softly, the kind of word the city has in its bones, and we went to work. "Go," Maya said. "I have him. We'll go up the back stairs through the garden. You make the street too complicated to rush." We did not have a fire truck. We did not have turnout coats or air or a hydrant we could claim. We had what we had. A fire extinguisher, a halogen, a notion of how buildings breathe. We could not put it out. We could make it less interesting to a crowd that reflexively moves toward interesting. We tipped over the 2 recycle bins we had cached on the way in, let their water bottles rattle like unhelpful dice. We pulled the planter at the curb so the street narrowed. We waved 2 neighbours who had been watching toward the corner in an urgent pantomime that meant, "Go the other way now." We set the extinguisher at the base of the stoop and left it for later hands. And then we moved, because the sound from the common turned from pressure to momentum. We met back at the garden walkway behind the 3rd house, down where Maya, with the help of the woman with the service dog, her name was Tara, we now knew, had turned the stairwell into a ramp by laying down carpet runners and guiding the man's rug like a sled. We slid him up the stairs and into the hallway, where he coughed twice, a good sign because it meant he was choosing to. His eyes opened. He looked at us without understanding and then with too much of it, and we smiled, because sometimes smiles are the only medicine that doesn't run out. "Name?" Maya asked, gentle. "Peter," he said, "I think." We laughed, the kind of laugh people do when they've been holding their breath too long. Back at our building, Peter took a place on the daybed we'd appropriated for the common room, and somebody put a blanket over him and tucked it around his shoulders like a grandmother. He slept. Maya set a sign above him that said, "Do not wake," except Maya, because she understood that sleep is work too. That night, the pressure on the hill became the story of the city. The common, drawn by its own centre of gravity, shook out a parade of movement that tested every corner. We held. Our neighbours held. The barricades were not walls so much as puzzles, and puzzles are discouraging when you don't understand the rules. We made noise in the right places, quieted others, and when 2 of the determined ones tested the front door with a slow persistence that made my throat go tight, we pressed our backs to the wood and felt each other's heartbeats like a drumline. They moved on. We breathed. We did not cheer because cheering is loud. On the 3rd day, the rumour of a ferry became a plan. Word moved rooftop to rooftop the way words used to move along fence lines when neighbours leaned at dusk, boats at the river. Not official, not scheduled, but real enough to bend our thinking. The Museum of Science dock had seen small craft take on people and run locks out into the harbour. Then on to points north, where someone's uncle had a lobster boat at a marina, and the marina had decided to become a staging area. The narrow waterway that had divided us from Cambridge now might carry us away. The risk was obvious. Moving a group across open ground toward a dock would draw attention. The reward, if we managed, was a way to change the map again on our own terms. We argued it around quietly, letting everyone who had found our square speak. Some would stay, committed to the hill that had become a village. Others had family north and would try to get to them by water. In the end, we made 2 plans that fit together. The first, hold and formalise. We would make a sign at the corner of Cedar and Pinckney that said refuge, quiet entry, knock and wait with arrows that meant what they said. We would set a watch schedule on paper with names, not just good intentions. We would allocate rooms. We would collect and ration food with the kind of fairness that does not feel equal, but keeps souls steady. The second, an escort to the river at dusk when the light is friend and shape is enemy. We would go rooftop to rooftop as far as we could, then slip to the streets near the esplanade and slide east to the museum. We would not go as one block that would feel like a parade. We would go in packets, each with a clear leader, each with a destination and a fallback. We would carry small lights, aim down, for signalling only. We would bring water and nothing we would cry about losing. We would go with a gravity that made it look like walking. I led one packet, Sean led another. Liam stayed to run the square and its rhythms because he had become a quiet sort of mayor. Maya stayed because her set of skills could not be spared, and because she looked at the boats with the kind of unwillingness that speaks of deeper reasons. "I get seasick," she said, which was so ordinary an admission in a week like this that we all treasured it. At dusk, the hill glowed with a few careful lights in windows. We tied cloth around arms for recognition because names get lost at night. We climbed to the roofs and started east, stepping over gaps we knew in our bones now, ducking under wires, moving past chimneys that felt like centuries. At the end of our rooftop line, we kneeled by the last parapet and looked down, the flat stretch of Storrow Drive, the ribbon of the Charles beyond, the curve of the museum's buildings like a ship. We signalled once, twice, and the white flag flickered on 2 roofs ahead, the agreed cue. We slid down the last fire escape, touched the quiet ground of an alley, and moved. We were 15, including a woman with a crutch whose face went pale, but whose chin did not tremble, and a kid with a backpack the size of his torso, who whispered the names of planets as we walked, as if the solar system wanted to walk with us. Storrow was emptier than it should have been, the perpetual line of cars replaced by a few abandoned vehicles whose doors stood open, their interiors a portrait of quick departures. We crossed at a slow jog, keeping to the shadow of the guardrail, and slipped down the slope to the footpath along the river, where runners used to make a religion of laps. The museum rose to our right, a rectangle of science, now a harbour of another kind. Near its dock, figures moved that did not move like the ones on the hill. They carried themselves with the rhythm of people choosing where they were going, not being pulled. A small craft nosed against the pier, its running lights taped. Someone on it motioned with 2 fingers. Come. The word has never been so large. We were 20 yards from the gangway when a wrongness tipped into existence. From the trees at the river's edge, from the line of shade where the footpath dips under the levered walkway, a set of figures slid out of the green, drawn by our moving shape, by the whisper of shoes on sand, by the mathematical certainty that anything big enough in a city sticks out. They weren't many, 6, then 8, but they weren't few, and they weren't scattered. They came on with that quiet speed that sounds like nothing until it is everything. Someone behind me gasped all the air out of their body. We didn't run. Running makes noise and invites falling, and both are invitations we couldn't afford. We tightened, a flock in reverse, and shifted to put a bench and a railing between us and them. "Bench is a wedge," I said stupidly, because I needed words. "Railing is a funnel." Sean's packet to our left moved, fluid and clean, so they would draw, if they drew, to one side, not the middle. The woman with the crutch set her weight and squared her shoulders at exactly the right angle, because she had probably spent years learning how to stand in crowds. The figures reached the open space, and hesitated in that instant where geometry and desire negotiate. The boatman on the dock lifted a small light and flicked it twice at the walkway. Once, if you know where to look, looks like nothing. Twice looks like language. 2 people on the dock sprang, quick, and dragged a length of something heavy across the walkway to reduce the angle of approach. It bought us seconds. Seconds are valves that change worlds. "Go steady," I said in a voice that did not crack. "Eyes on the board. One at a time. Keep moving forward. "Don't stop on the gangway." We made a slow train of ourselves. The kid with the backpack whispered, "Jupiter," like he was calling an older brother to come fetch him. The woman with the crutch moved like a metronome. The figures at the edge adjusted, then overcommitted to the left, where the wedge of the bench made their angle bad. One tried to climb the railing and met the physics of metal with a clang. It bought us one more breath. Half our group made the dock's boards, then the gangway, then the low deck of the boat, where hands helped hands without names. The boat itself rocked with a hunger it couldn't express. A second small craft. This one, a flat aluminum skiff with a motor that hums like a sewing machine, ghosted out from under the shadow of the bridge and nestled on the other side of the dock with that love a boat shows when it touches a dock, like it's skidding into home plate. Our remaining people flowed to both. The figures at the perimeter found their gap and surged. I didn't see the details because Sean put a hand on my shoulder and pressed, and I moved because my body was happier with that instruction than any other. The boat's deck came up to meet the soles of my shoes like an old friend, and I turned with my flashlight in both hands to make a light that would not blind my own people, but would dazzle the oncoming wrongness. It worked for 2 heartbeats. A hand closed near my ankle, and I lifted my foot like a gymnast and did not lose my balance. A small private victory that felt like earning a merit badge I never wanted. Then we were all on. The boatman said, "Lines!" And 2 of our crew, who had once been sailors by the way they moved, found the ropes and cast off. The engine murmured a little louder. The skiff did the same. The railed walkway to the dock vibrated with footfalls, and the figures reached its edge and stopped, puzzled by the way physics changes when water is involved. They hesitated, then one stepped and slid into the black and did not return right away. The others stepped back. The dock was suddenly its own border again. We pushed into the river with a low chug. The city moved around us, lights, silhouettes on the bridge, where a train had willingly gone to sleep. The slide of other small craft with faces lit by the glow of handhelds. The wind on the water had teeth, but it also had salt, and the salt tasted like a road. On deck, people cried in that silent way that means air through the nose only. The kid with the backpack whispered Saturn, and then fell asleep against his mother's side with his hand inside her coat, as if he were returning to the state that precedes waking. The woman with the crutch lay back and exhaled into the sky. Tara's service dog laid its head on her knee and blinked tiredly, as if it had done more than its share and would accept payment in the currency of sleep. I looked back at the hill as it lifted behind us, roof lines pricking at the night. On one rooftop, a square of white fluttered, not an alert, a wave. On another, red, then blue, a coded rhythm that meant pressure, then calm. I felt the gravity of 2 places at once, the pull of the boat and the tug of the square we had made into something like a neighborhood. That's the secret, I think, of any city in a hard season. You hold 2 loyalties at once. You move and you keep. We reached the locks, waited our turn with other small craft, whose captains exchanged nods that said, "Both, I see you, and we're not stopping to talk, not now." Out in the harbour, the air opened. Lights from East Boston and the seaport made a necklace on the water. Somewhere further north, someone had set up a lantern at the end of a pier, and that lantern would become a point on a new map. A different city made of safe spots and signals. Our boat angled that way. On the deck near the bow, the boy who had slept in his father's arms on our floor woke. He sat up and looked at the water, and then at the sky, and said with the clarity of someone who has not learned to qualify yet, "We are not the same as yesterday." "No," his father said, a hand in the boy's hair, "but we are still us." Behind us, the rooftops of Beacon Hill sank back into the cityscape, not lost, but absorbed. Our square would continue without me. I knew it. Liam would rig better signals. Lines of mirrors lit by sunspot dots bouncing from brick to brick. Maya would set up a longer table, a better inventory. Sean would angle the barricades in a way that meant firefighters could pass when they needed, but momentum would not. They would step out in daylight to the pharmacies on Charles and come back with exactly what was needed and nothing that carried curses. They would take in new people and ask their names and write those names on a solid schedule next to a note that said, "We are better together." They would tell children that the hill is a ship and everyone has a job. And me? I would step from the boat to another dock and take the hill in my body like a story you tell more than once. I would find a way to send messages back upriver in the currency of radio and rumour. I would keep a notebook with sharp pencils and write down what we did and what worked and what didn't. Not because I was pressed to tell it to the world, but because the telling might help the next block, the next hill, the next neighbourhood that decides to refuse to be erased. Days later, when I look back at the opening hours, I don't remember the siren or the breaking news as much as I remember smaller angles, the way the mirror at the barricade showed a sliver of street like a lens, the way Eleanor's cat watched the signals go up as if approving the methodology, the way a child said planet like it was a hymn, the way people signed their names next to watch slots and kept those promises as if those squares of time were the bricks now holding the hill together. We did not become soldiers. We became neighbours with purpose. We made the narrow streets into a shape that could be defended not by muscle but by thought. We chose not to burn for dramatic effect when something cooler and steadier would do. We learned how to be quiet when quiet made shadows pass by, and how to be loud when loud made help find us. We did not make grand speeches. We posted simple signs. We put the heavy planter where it guided motion towards safety. We practiced being a place. That is the story I will tell when someone asks about the night the airport went strange and the city changed its map. I will say the hill held, not all of it, not all at once, and not forever, but a square of it, a handful of roofs, a strip of street with a makeshift sign and a rhythm of shifts and a medical table on a landing that held. We found a way to be ordinary in a time that punished the ordinary, and the ordinariness became our shield. When the pressure rose, we pressed back with benches and patience. When the pressure fell, we didn't spend victory like a lottery ticket. We banked it and used the interest to escort a few more people to the dock. Months from now, if maps still mean anything, someone will draw a line around that square and write something like Beacon Hill, First Hold, or the Cedar Lane Way, Refuge in small letters that future people will read and try to imagine. They won't hear the way the wind off the river carries the smell of coffee from a cafe that opened for 1 hour after someone rigged a generator to a grinder. They won't know the exact weight of a planter dragged across cobbles by 10 hands and 1 old rope. They won't know the system of flags that looked like laundry but meant safe and hold and wait and come. They'll miss the alley mirror that kept us from turning a corner into someone else's momentum. They won't see the day list on Eleanor's fridge with neat check marks next to roof, stair, water, and rest. But you do now, because it's in you, the way the hill's angles are in me. If you ever find yourself near Joy Street in a time that has forgiven the city its hard season, look up. You'll see roofs that once held a small language of coloured cloth. You'll see stoops that remember our boots. And if you close your eyes, you might feel the way a neighbourhood becomes a place again, not with declarations, but with schedules, barricades that are more suggestion than war, and the stubborn habit of saying each other's names out loud. We left on a boat because the tide asked us to. Others stayed because the hill had chosen them. Both are true, and both are brave. The city holds both kinds of courage. The kind that fortifies and the kind that moves, like twin hands on a single rope. If you ever need to build your own square, start small. Find a corner where the street is a funnel you can understand. Put a bench where it will be more than a seat. Make a sign that says knock and wait. Put your name on the watch schedule. And when the pressure rises, remember the hill and the flags and the way we crossed to the dock, not because we were heroes, but because we were neighbours who had learned to be quiet until it was time not to be. That's what saved us that first week. Not anything dramatic, not fire or fury, Just the old, stubborn, unfancy work of people deciding to be there for one another and then proving it in every small decision, every lifted planter, every checked pulse, every quiet hour on a roof with a flashlight pointed down, not up, so the light would touch the ground where we needed it. When the moment came to move, we moved. When it came to hold, we held. And in a season when the city's map buckled and remade itself on the fly, a square of Beacon Hill wrote its own legend in clean, careful letters anyone could read. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.